Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rechak Wadash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of 2 Kings, the 23rd chapter, dealing with King Josiah and the I believe it's sometimes referred to as Josiah's reform, all right, but basically the cleaning up and the righteous things that Josiah did in following after the ways of Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. So this is the book of 2 Kings chapter 23 verse 1. And the king sent. Now remember in the 22nd chapter that we had dealt with King Josiah having first instructed that the temple be repaired. And in the midst, they ended up returning unto him the book of the law, in which when it was read to him, right out of the fear of the Lord, they sent to inquire of the prophetess Huldah to find out what would happen, you know. And so from then on, we're sort of going forward with Josiah being zealous in the fear of the Lord. So verse 1, and the king sent, and they gathered unto him all the elders of Judah and of Jerusalem. And the king went up into the house of the Lord Yahweh. So as we, once again, as you're reading the scriptures, you have to visualize what's happening here, right? And so now you have King Josiah, but you also have, a nice sizable amount, right, of elders, right, that are with him here. So they all go up, right, to the temple, to the house of the Lord, and all the men of Judah and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem with him. So that was a large gathering then. And the priests and the prophets and all the people, both small and great. And he read in their ears all the words of the book of the covenant, which was found in the house of the Lord Yahweh. And the king stood by a pillar and made a covenant before the Lord Yahweh, and walked after the Lord, and to walk after the Lord, and to keep his commandments and his testimonies and his statutes, and with all their heart and all their soul, to perform the words of this covenant that are written in this book. And all the people stood to the covenant. So they basically renew the covenant, right? And in agreement that, hey, in past times we have done wickedly, but we are resolved in our minds to follow the ways of the Lord. And the king commanded Hilkiah the high priest and the priest of the second order. And when you look into the second order, it's described as what you would initially think, right? Those that are almost like second in command underneath the high priest. And the keepers of the door, to bring forth out of the temple of the Lord all the vessels that were made for Baal and for the grove, which when you go into that word grove, I believe it goes into Asheroth, which was a Canaanite deity, right? She was one of the, basically going back to the Queen of Heaven spirit, like a mother goddess they paint her as. And remember, going back to the reign of Manasseh, he had that built and placed inside of the temple. And then a new altar was constructed for them to sacrifice there. And then the Lord's altar was just like put to the side somewhere. So Josiah is basically undoing all of that here. And for all the hosts of heaven, and he burned them without Jerusalem in the fields of Kidron. So by a space outside of Jerusalem, they burnt all these things, and carried the ashes from them on to Bethel. And he put down the idolatrous priests, whom the kings of Judah had ordained, to burn incense in the high places, in the cities of Judah, and in the places round about Jerusalem. Them also that burned incense unto Baal, to the sun, and to the moon, and to the planets, and to all the hosts of heaven. So they were doing a great deal of wickedness. worshiping idols, and that's not enough. Worshiping inanimate objects, worshiping the angels. I mean, sheesh. And he brought out the grove from the house of the Lord Yahweh without Jerusalem onto the brook Kidron. And you can imagine, right, like I said, when you go into this word grove in here, yes, you have grove, which is like the place where they serve idols, like a collection of trees. And then you have this grove, which is the idol itself. So you can imagine them bringing that out of the temple, taking it outside Jerusalem, and then burning it. And burned it at the brook Kidron, and stamped it small to powder, and cast the powder thereof upon the graves of the children of the people. And he brake down the houses of the Sodomites, and you would imagine this would be those that were down for this, right? The wicked ones. And he brake down the houses of the Sodomites that were by the house of the Lord. And going into that word Sodomites, it actually comes up as male temple prostitutes, okay? Because that was actually a thing with the Canaanites, temple harlots, right? That was a part of their rituals that were by the house of the Lord, where the women wove hangings for the grove. And one of the translations, you read the hangings as a shrine for that idol. And he brought all the priests out of the cities of Judah, and defiled the high places where the priests had burned incense, from Gibeah to Beersheba, and brake down the high places of the gates that were in the entering in of the gate of Joshua, the governor of the city, which were on a man's left hand at the gate of the city. Similarly, like if you were to, this is just given like directions, right? And once again, it makes more sense if you're living at that time. Today it's like somebody telling you, oh, you go to Manhattan, and then on 14th Street, you look to your left, there's going to be this, that's where Gap is at, for example, right? Verse 9, nevertheless, the priests of the high places came not up to the altar of the Lord Yahweh in Jerusalem, but they did eat of the unleavened bread among their brethren. Meaning those priests that had partaken in the sacrifices and burning incense on the high places, they weren't allowed to come to the altar and basically do the service to the Lord over there. But they did allow them to eat of the unleavened bread. So you can imagine in the Feast of Unleavened Bread, they wouldn't be partaking in the acts of the sacrifices and all of those, but they would, be allowed to eat the unleavened bread. And he defiled Topheth, which is the valley of the children of Hinnom, that no man might make his son or his daughter to pass through the fire to Molech. And that was actually a key area where they did that. Okay, the valley of Hinnom, all right, where they would burn and offer their children to Molech. And when you go into the New Testament, and even prior to that, they later turned that into that's where the fable of hell, right? One of the fables of hell goes back to the valley of Hinnom, because that's where they would burn their children and offer them to Molech. Okay, but when you go into the scriptures, the mystical place where you go and burn forever doesn't actually exist. It's a myth. Verse 11, and he took away the horses that the kings of Judah had given to the sun at the entering in of the house of the Lord Yahweh by the chamber of Nathan-melech, the chamberlain, which was in the suburbs, and burned the chariots of the sun with fire. And once again, you can imagine these probably being either real horses with chariots that they dedicated to the sun, or idols, right, or figures made with hands. And the altars that were on the top of the chamber, or of the upper chamber of Ahaz, which the kings of Judah had made, and the altars which Manasseh had made in the two courts of the house of the Lord Yahweh, did the king beat down and break them down from thence, and cast the dust of them into the brook Kidron. and the high places that were before Jerusalem, which were on the right hand of the Mount of Corruption, which Solomon the king of Israel had builded for Ashtoreth, the abomination of the Zidonians, and for Chemosh, the abomination of the Moabites, and for Milcom, the abomination of the children of Ammon, did the king defile. And remember, going back to the reign of King Solomon, he did set up these high places and altars for the women that he had married, right, which turned his heart away from the Lord in his old age. Josiah took care of all of that as well. And he brake in pieces the images and cut down the groves and filled their places with the bones of men. And this was actually, well, as we go down, it'll mention it, but this was prophesied that Josiah would do this. Moreover, the altar that was at Bethel and the high place which Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin, had made, both that altar and the high place he brake down, and burned the high place, and stamped it small to powder, and burned the grove. And to make this clearer, let's take a look here at the NLT. The king also tore down the altar at Bethel, the pagan shrine, right? When you go to the high place, it's really the shrine. It says here, the pagan shrine that Jeroboam son of Nebat had made when he caused Israel to sin. He burned down the shrine to the ground, and ground it to dust, and he burned the Asherah pole. And then you can look up Asherah, and read more about that. Cool. Where we at? Verse 16. And as Josiah turned himself, he spied the sepulchres. So as they're destroying these idols, they're breaking down these altars, breaking down the shrines, messing up those groves. In this case, he turns around and he sees the sepulchres, right, that were there in the mount, and sent and took the bones out of the sepulchres, because the sepulchres are where they buried men, right? And so they had them take the bones out and burn them upon the altar, and polluted it, according to the word of the Lord Yahweh, which the man of God proclaimed, who proclaimed these words. And I believe that's 1 Kings around the 13th chapter, if I'm not mistaken. This is the same man of God who got tore up by a lion because he was deceived by another prophet when the Lord told him that he should go and prophesy against Jeroboam and leave that area by a different route from which he came, and not to eat or drink anything there, though he was deceived by another prophet to eat and drink, and through the disobedience the Lord had a lion slay him. Nevertheless, he prophesied that Josiah would do these things. Verse 17. Then he said, "What title is that I see?" And the men of the city told him, "It is the sepulchre of the man of God, which came from Judah." And I would imagine this title being like a headstone. Let's see, or some indication, right, to show like, okay, this is a tomb, so on and so forth. Yeah, so here in NLT, right, it says, or the NKJV has it as a gravestone, NIV a tombstone, NLT a monument, so you get the point. Where we at? Yeah, it is the sepulchre of the man of God which came from Judah, and proclaimed these things that thou hast done against the altar of Bethel. And I believe he said it by name as well, right? Josiah. Yep, 1 Kings 13:2, and I'll read just this part right here. And he cried against the altar of the Lord, the altar in the word of the Lord Yahweh, this being that prophet, and said, "O altar, altar, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, behold, a child shall be born unto the house of David, Josiah by name, and upon thee shall he offer the priests of the high places that burn incense upon thee, and men's bones shall be burnt upon thee." Well, guess what Josiah did? In verse 18, and he said, "Let him alone. Let no man move his bones." So they let his bones alone, with the bones of the prophet that came out of Samaria. And remember that prophet that came to deceive the prophet that was slain by the lion. After the prophet had been slain, the older prophet, the deceiver, but though he wasn't wicked, he was just doing what the Lord told him to do. He ended up telling his sons, hey, we're going to bury this guy in my sepulcher or my tomb area, and when I die, bury me with him. So, for example, as we're reading here, you can see it says, NLT, Josiah replied, leave it alone, don't disturb his bones. So they did not burn his bones or those of the old prophet from Samaria, as we just mentioned. Verse 19, and all the houses also of the high priests that were in the cities of Samaria, which the kings of Israel had made to provoke the Lord Yahweh to anger, Josiah took away, and did to them according to all the acts that he had done in Bethel. So he broke them down, tore them up, broke down the altars, completely demolished those idolatrous abominations. And he slew all the priests of the high places that were there upon the altars, and burned men's bones upon them, and returned to Jerusalem. And the king commanded all the people, saying, keep the Passover unto the Lord Yahweh your God, as it is written in the book of this covenant. Surely there was not holden such a Passover from the days of the judges that judged Israel, nor in all the days of the kings of Israel, nor of the kings of Judah. So going all the way back to the time of Judges, all the way up until now, no Passover had been held like this one. But in the 18th year of King Josiah, wherein this Passover was holden to the Lord Yahweh in Jerusalem. And you can imagine this was that grand, because, this was them rejoicing, having turned back from that wicked path onto the Lord here. Moreover, the workers with familiar spirits, and the wizards, and the images, and the idols, and all the abominations that were spied in the land of Judah and in Jerusalem, did Josiah put away, that he might perform the words of the law which were written in the book that Hilkiah the priest found in the house of the Lord. And like unto him was there no king before him that turned to the Lord Yahweh with all his heart, and with all his soul, and with all his might, according to all the law of Moses, neither after him rose there any like him. Because it was really going to be a short succession of kings after him before that part was done away with. And if you notice, even going into the New Testament, the carnal title, right, of king wasn't really bestowed upon Israelites. Yeah, we know Yahushua is the ultimate king, right? But that's why I mentioned the carnal title. And the highest office you could really hold after that went into the high priest. Verse 26. Notwithstanding, the Lord Yahweh turned not from the fierceness of his great wrath, wherewith his anger was kindled against Judah, because of all the provocations that Manasseh had provoked him withal. And remember, Huldah the prophetess said that, right? Because the Lord was so angry, he had charged that judgment against Jerusalem, and so it was going to come to pass no matter what, regardless of them turning back to him at this point, though, as it was told to Josiah, it wouldn't come in his time, so he wouldn't have to see that. And the Lord Yahweh said, I will remove Judah out of my sight, or Judah also out of my sight, as I have removed Israel, and will cast off this city Jerusalem, which I have chosen, and the house of which I said, my name shall be there. So similar to what happened to the northern kingdom, though, you know what happens when the Babylonians get here. Now the rest of the acts of Josiah and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? In his days, Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, went up against the king of Assyria to the river Euphrates. And King Josiah went against him, and he slew him at Megiddo when he had seen him. And this being Pharaoh Necho slew King Josiah, so that's how he ended up dying. And his servants carried him in a chariot dead from Megiddo, Slovakia, 1 second. All right. Dead from Megiddo, and brought him to Jerusalem, and buried him in his own sepulchre. And the people of the land took Jehoahaz, the son of Josiah, and anointed him, and made him king in his father's stead. Jehoahaz was 23 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 3 months in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Hamutal, the daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah. So Josiah ended up dying in battle against Pharaoh, and his son Jehoahaz was put on the throne, but he only reigns for about, 3 months. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord Yahweh, according to all that his fathers had done. And Pharaoh Necho put him in bands at Riblah, in the land of Hamath, that he might not reign in Jerusalem, and put the land to a tribute of 100 talents of silver and a talent of gold. Because remember, Pharaoh Necho went up to fight against, at this point, the rising forces of the Babylonians and the Medes. Okay, and so Pharaoh Necho ends up putting this jurisdiction, right, this tax upon Israel, and basically deposes Jehoahaz, takes him up out of power. And Pharaoh Necho made Eliakim, the son of Josiah, king in the room of Josiah his father, and turned his name to Jehoiakim, and took Jehoahaz away, and he came to Egypt and died there. So now Jehoahaz, the son of Josiah, is basically taken off of his throne after 3 months of reigning, brought to Egypt, and that's where he dies. And now the other son of Josiah, Jehoiakim, or really Eliakim, is now put up to reign. And Jehoiakim gave the silver and the gold to Pharaoh, but he taxed the land to give the money according to the commandment of Pharaoh. He exacted the silver and the gold of the people of the land, of every one according to his taxation, to give it unto Pharaoh Necho. Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Zebudah, the daughter of Pedaiah of Rumah. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord Yahweh, according to all that his fathers had done. And that brings us to the end of the book of 2 Kings, the 23rd chapter, as we see the cleansing of the land, right, the keeping of the Passover, but then the death of Josiah, and then back to the cycle of wickedness of Judah, right? Though now we see that we're quickly approaching the harsh judgment that the Lord said he would bring upon Jerusalem. So with that, Lord willing, this was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Rachah, Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.